And welcome to This Week in Hospitality Marketing, live show number 480. I am your host, Lauren Gray. Thank you so much for joining us. If you're joining us live on our restreaming channels of Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitch, on different pages and channels for all of them through our association, Met Friends and business friends and so forth. Thank you so much for doing that. If you're watching us on our TV channel, the Hospitality Channel, on your Roku TV, Amazon TV, Google TV, Apple TV, any smart TV, LG, Samsung, whatever, thank you so much for watching us there. Also, if you're listening to us live on hospitalitychannel.tv, thank you for doing that. And gosh, I think that's all the places where the live show is right now. Well, of course, our repeat shows will be on hospitalitychannel.tv. That's our I Love Lucy Reeler on channel, so forth. But anyway, let's get to the topic at hand today, which is actually in flux because I'm currently working on it. So a lot of what I'm going to be talking is kind of thinking through mind mapping a bit of what we're dealing with this week when it comes to this topic. The topic is what really counts, predictive data that you should be watching. To be blunt and bold, I would say that we're on a progressive downturn in most markets that I'm associated with. Obviously, there's other markets that are coming into their seasonal time, think of the winter transitions and so forth. But a lot of the properties in general that I'm dealing with are in a flux of diminished demand. Traffic is going down. We've had some touching on discussions with this when it came to the type of economy we're in. It's a political year, an election year, big election year. Please go out and vote. And we're in a K economy, which is a symbolic representation that those with money have money. They're fine. They're continuing to do whatever they do because they have the money to do it. But anybody below that threshold quickly gets into a constraint model where they're faced with options of not and, but or. Given the time of year, given the holiday seasons, and given some of the impacts of natural disasters that we've had this year, more pronounced than others, being firsthand, and the reason why their background looks so shabby most of the time, is we're in a predictive state, a constant state of readiness of evacuating because we evacuate because we're mandated to evacuate because of hurricanes. That's caused a lot of burden, financial, for some people beyond the level that they can handle and so forth. But needless to say, the K economy is that there is a large portion of our population, domestic U.S., and I would say globally there are variations to which country in particular you're talking to, that just have a choice of whether they can do one or another thing. And we're in that retail section now. We're in that time where it's not so much about the travel choices that you would like to have, but rather, what do I have money for? And I need to buy gifts and or things because that's the time of year to do so. Every culture is being touched by this. Every culture has its time where there are gift givings and so forth. Regardless, anywhere in the world, there is a time that there's festivities. This is more pronounced than most. Wintertime in the Northern Hemisphere, summertime in the Southern Hemisphere. For that reason, we're seeing less travel interest. Now, that doesn't mean people aren't traveling. And of course, obviously, there's holiday travel. We're not excluding saying, oh, everybody's just deciding to buy stuff and not go travel. But they are having to make choices as to how much travel, whether they have the time to travel, whether they can afford to travel, in addition to the things that they find themselves financially obligated to, either because they don't have the funds to do anything, retail included, because they're recovering from something, or that they simply have retail obligations and they have to get prepared for the fact that holidays are coming in and they have to start planning for what it is that they have to do for those. Needless to say, going back to my original point, there's a lot of areas in the continental United States that are going on a decline of traffic. Travel is not in the forefront. I would say that historically, based on the ever-present demand that we've been having post-pandemic with the revenge travel, and then from there was the flurry of additional travel, and then there was the advantage travel and so forth. We're at a point now where that has been exhausted. And we're kind of going into a bit of a reset, personal opinion, into normal business demand flow for travel. For being that reason, there's less people to talk to. There's less traffic to convert. And that brings us to the topic of measuring what counts. And I say this, but part is a gripe, part is a realization that it doesn't change easily. It's like trying to move a mountain. It doesn't really move much, even if you do succeed in moving it at all. There's a large predominant part of the population in our industry that we rely upon simplistic data. What do I mean by this? For those even attached to the idea of looking at what performances marketing is doing for their particular business, which basically reduces you down to your top 10 percentile of people in your organization. 90% of your team doesn't involve themselves with the production of top line revenue. They're in the world of maintenance, housekeeping, guest services, ancillary services, so forth, food and beverage, support services, what have you. Theirs is to run the business daily. And even to that end, most of your supervisory staff in your hotels and restaurants are obligated to that. It's not that they're a blind eye to marketing. They just have no involvement of it, and they certainly have no opinion about it, and they certainly have no influence on it. They are the recipient of whatever happens from it. So for that reason, we're talking to the 10 percentile of the people that do have an active engagement with what marketing is doing. You can cut that number down even farther for the people that actually have the authority to make decisions based on it. There might be people that are aware of it, but they have no influence on it. So out of that 10% of the people that might be engaged with the data associated with marketing, I would say safely to cut them down to half. So 5% of your entire team is related to actually looking at, understanding, and making decisions based on the data from marketing. Of that 5% of your team that is engaged at that level, 95% of them, so nearest, the easiest to say, half of out of five, but yeah, let's just say that 95% of the 5% of your people actually just rely on what's called simplistic data. They look at, as they've been educated into the system, being however long they've been in the industry, of what is the total number of traffic of people that are looking at our advertisement. Good. Which channels did they see that in? Was it our paid ads? Was it our social media stuff? Was it our traditional media? Was it our whatever? Any of the channels you want to pick. And of those people that saw that, how many of them came to our website and looked at our booking engine? And which channels provided, how much compared to each other? Channel contribution. And of that, how many of those people bought something? And what percentage is that out of everybody? Okay, so how many people came to see us? How many people went to our booking engine? And how many people booked? And what is that number? Not just the revenue that it generates, but the number of those people. And they leave that knowledge at that level. That is all they really tend to look at. So let's say that's the 95% of the 5% of your people. With that, you sorry, I've lost my thought with it. I'm getting pings from things for work, and I was also like, gear shift. Out of that, there's a small fraction of those people, in addition to the 95% of people that just look at those simplistic numbers, that they look at performance, meaning what's producing it. Not just how many people went to the booking engine, how many people went and converted and so forth, but what are the performance of the campaigns? What is each channel doing? Not just channel contribution, but performance of each channel. Like, how much is it costing for direct for Google Ads? How much is it costing for OTT? How much is it costing for meta search? How much is it costing for social? What is our most productive channel, and what is the most cost-effective channel? And where is that production coming from? They ask the next level of questions. That's about a 2 to 3 percentile of people that are beyond the 95% of people just look in general. And they look in a very tertiary manner. They look at something that's quick and efficient. They really want to be more aware than they want to be functional. They rely upon third-party services, vendors such as myself or anybody else, internal teams that they have for it and so forth, that look at it to see if there's something they need to be worried about or ask more about. So it's been simplified for them that green means positive, red means negative. Arrow up is positive, arrow down is negative. And the number, proportionate ratio, percentages are self-explanatory. So for that reason, they look and see if there's something that should bother them. As long as the number is green, the arrow is up, and the percentage is some number, then they feel like things are going well. Then there's the 1% of the people, maybe 2% at most, out of all these people we're talking about, that dive a little deeper. They're the ones that actually handle the accounts. They're the ones that are in there making the ad campaigns, the groups, the sets. They're doing the the headers and the description lines and which images to use and which videos to use, which phone numbers to click on, so forth. They're the boots on the ground line person that is handling the function of that. And they're looking at whether or not the campaign is doing what it was built to do. Now, in their world, in their job, they are to facilitate the requests of those that make the decisions of what it is they want to market. They're the doers. Doesn't mean that they're the ones that make all of the decisions as to which campaigns they run and which ones run best and which ones run at a margin and so forth. And they may not even be the ones that create the benchmarks of whether performance is good or bad. They're there to facilitate. And I say this with a blunt tone because a lot of times this is where you run into the apathetic aspect of relationships between vendors, internal teams, and so forth. Hey, you asked me to do this. I checked the box. I did it. Whether it's successful, whether it's productive, is really not the direct responsibility of me because you made the decision to do it. I facilitated it. So if it doesn't do what it wants to do, it was your decision to take the consequence or the whatever for it. That detachment is where we begin to create problems. We've talked about that before. And also a bit of a blind eye as to performance in general. Now, what do I mean by going back to our theme of our show of what really counts, predictive data you should be watching? In the world that I've just described, as negative as it sounds, there is the need to just let me thought. Look past the numbers. I'm sorry. There's a persistence on someone trying to get a hold of me, and I forgot to mute my phone, so my mind gears off. Sorry. In this world of what I just described, negative as it may be, and so forth, you have this detachment that's going on. You have the need to look beyond just whether a number is still green, whether there's an arrow still up, whether there is something that the campaign is running according to certain levels. There's a depth of knowledge underneath of it that is needed to be looked at. And that's the part that we need to talk about with predictive modeling. That's the data that we need to begin to look at. Sorry, got to get my mind back into what I was talking about. So, when you're looking at data, we have the superficial data we just mentioned. You have the traffic, you have the booking, those are the booking engine, those are the conversions, and so forth and so on. And that handles most of the population's data. Then you have the 2 or 3% out that's looking at the performance of the data. They're usually the facilitators, the decision makers as to what runs or what has funding to run and so forth. And they're looking at whether it's simply green above, it's producing, or red that it's not producing. Then you have the people that are the boots on the ground. They're the ones that are actually creating and functioning the data. And from that, they are often detached from the actual success of it and or responsibility for decision modeling of it. They're simply the facilitators. Then you have a group of people that should be in relationship to both of those that are looking at the data beyond the superficial reporting and looking at what's producing it. Why is it being produced the way that it is? And this is where you begin to get interesting data sets. Now, over the course of the past year, you've heard us talk at length as to the values of GA4 data, the expansion of the data that's available from it, the data points that can be used by it, the ability to track things that you hadn't tracked before simply because it's tracking everything. But we really haven't talked about the actual mechanics of what does that mean. We've had to, unfortunately, much to my frustration, to retranslate that data into the simplistic data that 95% of all people that even have a part in the process of understanding marketing or what's contribution value of marketing look at. And it dumbs it down a lot. It's kind of something like bringing keys to a spaceship, as I often say, and the person just tries to strike it on a rock to make a fire, not realizing the potential of what the spaceship can do. That's where the data really, truly is. There's a depth of data that needs to start being looked at. But rather than getting into the whole diving, and I told you at the beginning of this, there was a bit of a ramble to this. We're in the middle of defining what all this is as to how to create a health score. A means of measurement is to determining predictively when things are not doing what they will continue to do. Doesn't mean they were bad, doesn't mean they failed, but there's a performance cycle that goes with any campaign. Even the perennial evergreen campaigns that most run, which are more brand related, have a cycle of impact that go up and down depending upon volume of demand and value of interest. And even though the campaign hasn't changed, its value changes because of those two factors. We talked at great lengths about the use of trend and pace. This comes back into the conversation today because what you need to begin to look at is below the surface of the indication of whether something's positively contributing or negatively contributing or negatively drawing. And that is, you need to begin to see trend. The idea that a campaign, as an example, launches and runs, and it creates great, wonderful. It's a huge success. It was built well. It was built by proper targeting, and it is running to the way it was intended and doing very well, maybe exceeding expectations even. But over time, the value of that campaign begins to diminish. Subtly at first, maybe, or abruptly if it's a seasonal or specific time sensitive offer, it falls off a cliff. If the offer is only good to a certain date, after that date and it's still running, it dies. Now, it still can generate traffic and they can maybe find a different offer, but you've created an issue of lack of trust and confidence in you because you're offering a stale and dead offer that they followed only to find out it's no longer available and that you still have it running. It's a little bit like walking, I used to say, driving by a Friday fish sale sign at a restaurant on Saturday. Kind of like, good to know 6 days from now. And I'm feeling bad I missed it a day. Why don't you update your sign to being what Saturday's special is? That's the feel that these old ad campaigns run like. So there could be cliffs of where campaigns fall off because they're date sensitive. So that's one thing. That would create a very large delta of, hey, it's doing great, and then it stopped being great. Okay. That's one example. Hold that over here. Another example, brand campaign, like we started with. Runs well, and its values begin to diminish. Seasonal shift. People aren't as interested in your destination anymore. People aren't as interested in coming in to stay with you anymore. The brand identity and the exposure of it is well optimized because it was well performing, but it's past its prime of interest because it's stale or somebody's already seen the ad or they're not reacting to what you're saying anymore, so forth and so on. We talk about ad types. Well, those things all happen under the surface of these red arrow, green arrow reports. The subtle changes in performance and the dramatic changes in performance all happen to contribute to what that arrow up or down, green or red, indicate. This is the real world of what happens. Out of the 10% of your entire team that has any involvement with being aware of your marketing strategy, and of that 10%, only 5% actually has an active engagement as to looking at reports and reacting to them. And of that, only 2% of the people actually have the value of control over those choices. The 1% of people that actually have omnipotence over both of those, okay, they're looking in general to the numbers that show them the result of all the campaigns together. And what will happen is all of a sudden one day that green arrow is now red. That number percentage contribution is 0 or negative. And from that, they're like, hey guys, what happened to the paid campaigns, or what happened to our advertising? And the foot soldiers will go in and they'll say, well, our seasonal campaign ended and brand is not producing as much as it did before because we're coming out of season, we're going to shoulder, so the volume's not there, the traffic and the conversion is not there. Okay, well, what are we doing? Well, we should launch a new ad for the current season, and we should change our brand campaigns to reflect the next season, so forth and so on. Great. That reactionary, okay, it went down to a negative number. Now what are we going to do? Creates a gap point, because now you're not producing as well as you need to. You're in the negatives, little red arrows down, percentages are down, and you're now collaborating through communication. Like, okay, so what are we doing? Okay, diagnose what the issue is. That's not the issue. Okay, what do we have to do about it? That's the solution. Create the solution, authorize the solution, confirm the solution, launch the solution, and then the solution has to begin to create its own success. That dip creates a whole level reduction of what you're producing with your marketing. And of course, then maybe the green arrow goes back up, the numbers go up, contribution goes up, It's all good. That's fine, but that dip cost you. Looking at data that helps you to predict the need to make changes is the things you need to start doing. You need to expand the 2% of the people that actually look at these things hands on to the whole 5% of the people asking, so what's producing this right now? Is there a timestamp to how well it's going to continue to produce? Is there something we already have built, and when are we launching it? How are we launching it? And are we going to keep consistency? Now, there's ways to look at this data to begin to see cracks in the veneer. You'll begin to see deltas, basically changes between what you were producing previously over a period of time that you designate, whether it's past 30 days, past period, uh, year over year, quarter, whatever the assignment is based on the cycle of the ads. That's a whole nother discussion. And you're comparing it to current performances. And that current performance creates a delta. This number compared to this number creates a variance. That variance is the delta. Now, that delta can be represented in two ways. It could be a very dramatic delta, like negative 1,450%, meaning this campaign fell off of a cliff. It went from being good to being bad. Now, it doesn't mean bad yet. It still might be producing well, but in comparison to its previous performance, which is the metric shift mindset that I'm asking about, is it's not doing as well, and it's not doing it well dramatically fast. What are you doing? First up question is why? And you satisfy that question with, is it time stamped? Is there campaign shift? Did something break? Is the offer not good? Is the booking link not good? The mechanics of it all. But if all those are satisfied, and it should be performing, then you have to decide, do we have to replace it or augment it? And this goes back to our conversation last week about stress testing the budget. And that is, you have to replace your channel contributions and vary your channel contributions to know what other channels you would have to compensate that. And part of that comes through understanding the total percentage that that channel represents in its contribution value to you, and of what full capacity of what you could do to improve it. There's a limitation to what channels can do, that the law of diminished return, that the more money you spend is not worth it because it isn't producing at a level that is mathematically valuable for you, where it's costing you more money than it is making for you. So there's a limit to how much a channel can contribute. Example being, if your paid ad campaigns with Google represent 10% of your total top line revenue contribution, and they're operating at a 65% market penetration, and your cost factor is at $1.50, you might be able to get up to 70% or a little titch more, but the cost of it is going to be $2.50, $3 a click. Where does that value begin to convolute to being not worth doing? And how much, if you want to consider the percentage of your audience, and this is a simple math to do, what is your total audience that you're getting? And that represents 65% of what number? So you now have an increment of every point of voice. That's a volume. You attach the volume of what it cost you to get it, and you can figure out how much you need to spend on it to increase your volume of voice. At what point, they won't always be the same cost as it goes up. It gets harder and harder to keep incrementing your volume of voice up. That cost factor goes up. You may say, well, I might be able to increase the contribution temporarily from 10% top line contribution to 12% contribution, but anything beyond that, and it's going to be cost ineffective. So now you know your cap limitations of your channel contributions. Should one of your other channels diminish in value, you know where else you can try to buoyant it up. It's not your preferred cost channels, but you want to keep the volume of business going up at a cost that you can still afford. That's a whole math into itself. So going with that idea, you're looking at predictive modeling where previous performance over current performance creates the delta. The delta might be just a small delta. It just begins to show that it's not producing the same. Now, you can have positive deltas. It's actually improving compared to previous performances. That's all good in that sense. And then the other ones that are negative, you begin to look at. Is it just a natural progression? Do we have to replace the ad set? Is it no longer timely, pertinent? Is the imaging incorrect? You go through the same technical questions. Is the ad content still well targeted? Is the target that it's designated for still relevant? Is the timing of the offer still pertinent? These are the mechanics of the ad programs that go through that 2% of the people that you deal with should be aware of. But they should be looking at the performance delta of the campaigns to know whether or not there's a need to begin to augment. And there should always be the next plan. Once something's running, you should already be building the thing that's going to be replacing it or augmenting it. There's a never-ending cycle of what's next. And of course, as you build over time, you have certain evergreen things that you know just work well at certain times, and you turn them on at those certain times. Case in point, old school study. When it turns cold and stays cold up north, usually towards the latter part of November, sometime in December, depends with climate, with global warming, when that's going to be anymore. But we had a whole series of advertisement that was set and ready, approved and confirmed on budgets and everything else, that as soon as the cold snapped and stayed cold, we launched the campaigns for them to come to Florida. Because that was the time when that value of those campaigns ran true. Obviously, talking about warm and balmy and beautiful in Florida in the middle of summer up north is less relevant than you're freezing at a bus stop or driving down the snowy road caught in traffic, and you see a nice sign and or hear an ad about how why not get away to Florida, and here's a great offer. Timing of those things are important. So you have evergreen ones that you plug in at certain times. You have ones that run perennial branding that you go at certain times, non-branded, destination-based, NAP-based, name, address, phone number kind of stuff based, advertisement that goes perennial. And then you have feature abilities, event-driven, seasonal-driven. All those are integrated into a marketing plan that is scheduled. And so you always have this in perpetuity as you look at the deltas of your performance to know when you need to insert in either an augmentation or a replacement. And to that point, sometimes some campaigns, as well as intended as they were, do fall flat. Now, there is an attribution cycle that goes along with any new launch campaigns. You cast a wider net. You look at key performance indicators as to what levels you want them to perform at. Those that fall below that, you cull them down so you can finance more the value of the ones that are succeeding. And you create this model that works for an ad campaign. You always question that as you go on. It doesn't mean that you had a bad idea. It just may be an ill-timed idea. So you hold on to the ideas and see if there's an applicability each time you readdress what the next phase of your marketing will be. So this awareness, this going back to the theme of what really counts, predictive data you should be watching, is performance over performance, not whether or not currently they're performing at a positive level. They might be still producing, which is good, green arrow up, number positive, but they're producing diminishingly less and less and less until a point where they fall below that performance line. You then have to go through this time cycle of reevaluation, rediscovery, redeployment. That dip creates a lowering of top line revenues in general, and that bleeds against your overall performance over a longer period of time. So that's why we're referring to it. So anyways, that was my point to be made today, which was what really counts, predictive data you should be watching. More to come on that, because as I said, this week was full of creating a report that is going to hopefully transition people from understanding just the basic metrics they're familiar with, the total volume, traffic going to booking engine, how many converted, to what are your competitors doing? How are you related to your competitors? What is looking like things are changing before they finally change negatively, this predictive stuff. So we're building a construct for this that hopefully will be used by more people so they get more comfortable with an expanded amount of data. So more to come on that. Anyways, for all of you again watching globally, 209 countries, the TV channel, our TV channel runs into, and thank you so much. We do rebroadcast this show at 11:30 a.m. Sydney, Australian time for our APAC friends, 11:30 a.m. London time for our EU and Mideast friends. Any questions that you have, any feedback you have, any suggestions that you have, co-hosting and all included, please contact me at lauren@hospitalitydigitalmarketing.com, and or you can reach out to me at hdm.news/talkback. That's an audio one that you just leave an audio recording on. Give me permissions to use what your opinion is or answer the question that I give each week, and use that content as well, and what permissions are for that. And I'll be happy to get back with you. I always get back with you. Everyone that is ever emails me or what have you, and for great comments for people that see me live, thank you so very much for doing so. So once again, my name is Lauren Gray. I thank you for the privilege of your time, and I look forward to talking to you next week.